The night my mother remarried, I stood alone in my father's old warehouse and realized the locks were still warm. Someone had been inside. I didn't panic, because the only person who would dare open those doors had no idea what he'd just awakened. My father used to say the warehouse wasn't a place, it was a promise. A promise that some truths survive longer than people. After he died, Mom sealed it up and told everyone it was empty, just dust, broken shelves, old regrets. I never corrected her. I never told her what was hidden there, because some secrets only protect you if they believe you don't know them. Her new husband, Mark, arrived like a clean sentence in a messy paragraph. Polite smile, steady job, gentle hands on my mother's shoulders. He spoke softly, asked permission, fixed what was broken. And yet, from the first dinner, he asked the wrong questions about Dad's business, about the warehouse, about whether anyone still had the keys. I watched him the way my father taught me, by noticing what he didn't say. Mark never mentioned money, but he watched how bills were paid. He never spoke ill of my father, but he lingered over his photos, counting something in his head. When he laughed, it arrived a second too late. When he touched my mother, his eyes drifted elsewhere, as if listening for a door opening. I kept quiet. Silence is not weakness, it's leverage. The first sign came with the missing file. I knew it was missing because I remembered its weight, the way the folder bowed under pressure. Dad used to make me carry boxes when I was younger, saying strength wasn't lifting, it was remembering where everything belonged. That file belonged on the second shelf, behind the rusted fan, under the ledger with the torn spine. When I found the fan moved and the ledger upside down, I felt a calm certainty settle in my chest. Mark had found the spare key. At home, he started slipping little things. A sudden interest in security cameras. A casual question about whether I'd ever been inside the warehouse. He asked it while pretending to stir tea, his spoon tapping the cup too fast. I answered honestly, but not completely. Not in years. I said the truth has many doors. That night I returned to the warehouse and replaced the file. Not where it was, but where it wanted to be. I adjusted the lights, changed the angles of the shadows, and left a note inside a drawer I knew he'd open. Just one line written in my father's careful hand: "You're early." I didn't sign it. From then on, Mark began to watch me. I let him. Being seen can be useful. He started staying late at work, coming home with a distracted hunger, as if something was calling him back to that building. He'd ask my mother if she ever wondered what Dad kept from them. She'd laugh it off. "Nothing worth keeping," she said. I wondered if she could hear the lie echoing. I spoke to Dad in my head as I planned. He used to warn me that revenge fails when it rushes. So I slowed everything down. I became predictable. I took the same route home, said the same lines at dinner, asked Mark about his day with the same polite interest. I let him believe I was harmless, grieving small. Inside the warehouse, I rearranged the past. There were recordings my father never shared, voices that changed tone when they thought no one was listening. Contracts signed in pencil, not ink. Receipts folded into books that pretended to be novels. And one thing my mother never knew: the warehouse wasn't just storage, it was a mirror. It showed people who they were when they thought they were alone. Mark returned. I knew because the dust told me. He stayed longer this time. He took pictures, he made calls. I listened from my car, engine off, breath slow. I didn't need to hear his words, his posture said enough. Shoulders tight, head tilted like he was bargaining with someone who wasn't answering. The next morning, he was gentle again. Too gentle, he apologized for nothing. He kissed my mother's forehead and asked me if I wanted breakfast. His voice was steady, but his eyes were calculating exits. He had seen something that didn't match the story he'd built. People like Mark don't panic, they prepare. So did I. I left another note in the warehouse, this time where he wouldn't expect it. I changed the locks he thought he controlled. I let a rumor slip through, a person who loved to talk and hated to verify. I made sure Mark heard it from someone else, because truth tastes sweeter when you think you stole it. By the end of the week, he was unraveling, sleep-deprived, short-tempered, asking questions that revealed answers. My mother noticed. She asked me if I trusted him. I told her trust wasn't a feeling, it was a system. She nodded, unsure what I meant, and for the first time I saw fear touch her smile. That night, Mark followed me. I led him to the warehouse without looking back. I unlocked the door slowly, letting the hinges sing the way they always had. Inside, the lights flickered just enough to make doubt feel alive. I walked deeper, past the shelves, past the fan, past the place where the file used to be. I stopped where the floorboards changed tone, where my father used to pause before telling the truth. Behind me, Mark whispered my name. I didn't turn around. The lights steadied, the silence pressed in, and somewhere in the dark, something he thought he'd already taken began to play. His whisper echoed against the walls, low and tense, like a question that didn't deserve an answer. I stepped over a loose plank and didn't look back. Every sound he made, the shuffle of his shoes, the click of his keys, the nervous inhale, was a clue. I had spent weeks memorizing these shadows, learning their weight, listening for the tremor in the air. Now, it was his turn to learn them. Mark stopped a few feet behind me. "What is this place?" His voice wavered. The first crack, I let it sit there, a pause heavier than any accusation. I didn't answer. Instead, I ran a finger along the edge of a ledger, feeling the ridges, the fingerprints of my father's careful work. I let my eyes scan the shelves, pretending to study dust. But I was listening to the sound of him realizing he had entered a world he didn't understand. He took a step closer. I know something's here. Something you've been hiding. I smiled faintly. Silence became my weapon. There's a strange power in not speaking. It forces the other person to speak for you. Mark's eyes darted toward the corners, the shadows, the faint glow of the old light bulbs above. I could almost see the gears turning in his mind, calculating, doubting, questioning his own senses. I moved deeper into the warehouse, the floorboards groaning like the voice of a living thing. He followed, slower now, hesitant, aware he was intruding into a domain he thought he owned by knowledge alone. He didn't realize the rules had already been written. I stopped by the old desk, the one my father had built with his own hands. On it lay a single photograph, slightly yellowed. My father, younger than I had ever seen him, standing next to a man I didn't recognize. I lifted it, turned it in my hands, and traced the outline of the unknown figure. "Do you know who this is?" I finally asked, letting my voice break the silence. Mark's lips pressed together. He shook his head slowly. "I don't." "Then you're already behind," I said softly. The words were calm, deliberate, like the drop of water that erodes stone. I set the photo down, leaving him staring at it as if it could explain everything he wanted to know. The air between us thickened. Mark realized that every move he made was being watched, cataloged, measured. And yet he couldn't stop. He was trapped by curiosity, by greed, by pride. I had seen it in my father's eyes too. The same mistake repeated by those who underestimate patience. I walked toward the far corner, where a stack of crates hid something valuable. Something I had deliberately left for him to find. I wanted him to reach, to touch, to believe he was in control. The thrill of false power is the most intoxicating of all. Mark stepped closer, his breath uneven. "Why are you letting me do this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't answer. I only tilted my head toward the crates. He took a hesitant step forward and lifted the lid of the top crate. Inside lay old documents rolled and tied with faded ribbons, and at the bottom a small metal box. Mark's eyes widened. He lifted the box and ran his fingers along the lock, fumbling slightly. I let him struggle. There's a unique pleasure in watching someone wrestle with a challenge they think they understand. His hands shook as he tried different angles, combinations, searching for a pattern. He didn't notice the ledger I had moved to the side a few moments ago, the one that contained the real key to the box, not the mechanical one, but the intellectual one, the one only someone who had grown up in these shadows could decode. He looked up at me, a mix of frustration and fear flickering across his face. You knew I'd come here?" I nodded once. "Of course." Mark's breathing quickened. He was beginning to realize the rules of this game, and that realization always comes with panic. People like him are used to power being external. They think control is held in objects, doors, locks. But I knew control is in perception and patience, in the ability to let someone believe they are the predator when, in reality, they are walking into a trap they can't even see. The box finally clicked open under his fumbling hands. He lifted the lid and froze. Inside were photographs, letters, recordings, all meticulously arranged. They revealed not just past secrets, but the blueprint of my father's mind, a mind that had always anticipated betrayal. Mark's eyes flickered from one piece of evidence to another. He had imagined treasure, perhaps money, perhaps leverage. Instead, he found awareness. I watched his face. Pride gave way to confusion, confidence gave way to fear. The kind of fear that doesn't scream, it whispers, it gnaws, it makes you question every decision you've ever made. "You think you've won?" I asked, voice low, deliberate. "You think this changes anything?" He looked at me as if searching for an answer in my calm expression. I let him twist in uncertainty, every second a small victory. I walked past him, hands behind my back, and ran my fingers along the shelves as if admiring dust. "You never understand patience until you live inside it," I continued. "My father taught me that. He taught me that revenge is not about haste or spectacle, it's about timing, about letting someone fall into the shape you've designed for them without ever seeing the pattern." Mark swallowed hard, his jaw tightened. He realized slowly that every move he had made in the last week, every attempt to manipulate or control had been observed, cataloged, and anticipated. Every slip he had made, every question he had asked, had been a step toward this moment, one where he understood he was not in control, but I was. I stepped aside to let him absorb the weight of the room. The walls seemed to close in, the shadows stretching longer, darker. I watched as he traced the edges of the photographs, the letters, the recordings, and for the first time, I saw him falter. Not because he was scared of me, but because he realized the depth of what he had stumbled into, the intelligence, the patience, the quiet power that had been growing silently, like a shadow behind his own confidence. He finally spoke, his voice tight, almost a whisper. Why didn't you tell your mother?" I let that hang. Some truths are only revealed when the lesson is fully understood. Mark's confusion was the most honest reaction, the one that revealed everything he hadn't yet grasped. I moved to the center of the warehouse, where the shadows converged, and paused. The metal box sat open behind him, the contents spilling their silent accusations into the air. He was breathing faster now, frantic, but still restrained. He had not yet reached for me, had not yet realized the trap was not physical but mental. "You have no idea what you've triggered," I said softly, "and by the time you do it will be too late to turn back." Mark's eyes darted to the door, then to the box, then to me. Panic, curiosity, fear, they battled visibly in his expression, and I let him stew in it. Every second of hesitation, every thought he tried to hide, became my advantage. I left him there, standing over the open box, the weight of his own arrogance pressing down on him. I turned and walked toward the far wall, where a small hidden staircase led to another part of the warehouse. I didn't need to check behind me. His mistakes were already written across the room. I could feel it in the air, in the shift of his posture, in the subtle tightening of his fingers. Tonight was just the beginning. I hadn't needed to touch him, threaten him, or reveal the full scope of what I knew. I had simply shown him enough to let him understand that he was already caught. The rest would unfold in layers, invisible to anyone but me, and somewhere in the shadows, a clock ticked. Not measured in seconds, but in the slow, inevitable unfolding of a plan long in motion. Mark took a tentative step after me, as if daring to follow. But I didn't look back. Patience, my father had taught me, is the deadliest weapon, and I had learned to wield it like a shadow that moves only when it chooses. The warehouse had been silent for years, keeping its secrets. Tonight it whispered again, but only to those who knew how to listen. Mark hesitated at the bottom of the stairs, his shadow stretching long across the warehouse floor. His every breath betrayed him now, a rhythm I could measure like a drum beat. I didn't speak. I let the silence do its work, the kind of silence that makes a person imagine threats that aren't even there. He followed anyway, slow, cautious. Every step was a test, every glance a calculation. I could feel him trying to anticipate my next move, trying to regain some measure of control. Control is a seductive illusion, one that tastes sweet until you realize someone else has already taken it. The staircase led to a small loft my father had used as an office. Dust motes danced in the weak light, and I could almost hear my father's voice in the shadows, whispering strategies, hints, and warnings. Mark reached the top and froze. "You've been here before," he said, his voice uneven. "This place. You know it too well." I nodded, leaning against the railing, my hands folded. "It's not about knowing it," I said calmly. "It's about understanding it. Understanding the silence, the gaps, the mistakes others make when they think no one is watching." Mark's eyes darted around the loft. The ledgers, the old letters, the hidden compartments in the walls, they all spoke to him in ways he didn't yet understand. I had rebuilt this place into a mirror of my father's mind. Everything he saw, everything he touched, was a reflection designed to expose him. "I don't understand," he admitted, swallowing hard. "Why are you doing this? Why are you letting it drag on?" I smiled faintly. "Because the longer it drags on, the deeper you fall into it. You think you're hunting, but you're being hunted. That's the rule my father taught me, and he was right." I could see the panic rising in him now, subtle at first, a twitch in the jaw, a blink too fast, a hand brushing the railing as if steadying himself. I let him stew in it, every second a reminder that he had no idea what he had walked into. I walked past him, moving slowly, deliberately. Each step echoed in the loft, each sound a psychological tick, counting down to the revelation he could not yet see. I reached the far wall, where a small cabinet concealed the most dangerous secret, a folder of evidence that could unravel not only him but the entire life he thought he controlled. I left it partially open, a deliberate tease. He noticed instantly, of course, his eyes widened, but he didn't reach for it. Not yet. He was learning restraint the hard way. "Do you know what this is?" I asked softly. He shook his head, trying to hide the tremor in his hands. "I don't." "You think this is a game of strength," I said, letting the words drip like cold water. "It's not. It's a game of patience, of awareness, of seeing the cracks in someone else's armor before they see yours. And the cracks are all yours." Mark's breathing grew uneven. He wanted answers, and yet I refused to give them. Every question he asked only tightened the web I had spun around him. I could see him calculating, trying to reconstruct the past week, trying to figure out where he had gone wrong. But the truth is, he hadn't gone wrong. He had been carefully led astray, every choice guided by someone who knew his mind better than he knew it himself. I walked to the small desk in the corner, where an old tape recorder sat, my father's voice preserved like a warning from beyond the grave. I pressed play. His voice filled the room, soft, deliberate, a cadence meant to unsettle. "Some truths," the recording said, "are weapons. Some silences shields, and some people, when they think they are in control, are most vulnerable to the ones they trust least." Mark froze. His eyes were fixed on the recorder, then me. He realized he had walked into a narrative written long before he arrived, a story where he was the antagonist but didn't even know it. I let him stand there, letting the weight of the moment press down. I could see him trying to recall every conversation, every glance, every seemingly insignificant action over the past weeks. Each memory was a breadcrumb, each error a trap, each assumption another chain tightening around him. "You think you can manipulate people," I said, stepping closer. "You think you can hide in shadows. But shadows are only empty if you refuse to see what's inside them. And I've been watching them for years." Mark's lips parted. He tried to form a response, but the words caught in his throat. He was beginning to understand the extent of the game, and the understanding brought fear sharper than any threat could. I moved to the cabinet and touched the edge of the folder, letting him glimpse the contents without revealing everything. I wanted him to imagine the worst, to let his mind fill in the gaps. Psychological pressure is far more effective than physical force. It lingers, eats away, and reshapes behavior. You want the truth? Oh, you'll have it. But only when I decide it's time. Until then, every moment you spend guessing, every step you take, every thought you hide, it belongs to me now. Mark's shoulders tensed, his breathing was rapid. His confidence was gone, replaced by a careful, calculated panic. He tried to mask it, tried to project control, but every move he made betrayed the fear underneath. I leaned back against the railing, calm, composed, letting the room's atmosphere do the work. The warehouse, once silent, now felt alive. Every shadow, every corner, every creak whispered secrets to me, and he could only follow. Always a step behind. He took a tentative step toward the folder. I didn't move, I let him inch closer, and every centimeter was part of the trap. The closer he came, the deeper he fell into the structure I had created. I watched him trace the edges, imagine the contents, wrestle with the realization that he was not in control, and had never been. You can't undo what's already begun, I said softly. Every choice you've made led you here, and every step you take from now on will only tighten the net. You're already caught. Mark's eyes flicked toward the door, then back at me. He considered fleeing, considered fighting, considered pleading. But he knew deep down that none of it would change the fact that he had walked into a plan far beyond him. I turned and walked toward the far wall, leaving him to stew in the growing panic. I could hear him shift behind me, measure distances, calculate risks, weigh options. Every sound was a confirmation that the trap was working. The loft was quiet again, but tension hung like a living thing. Mark's shadow moved across the floor, small and certain, a puppet whose strings had already been cut. I didn't need to act. I didn't need to raise my voice. The mind games, the careful orchestration, the anticipation, they were enough. And in that quiet, I knew the final act would be mine. I paused at the window, looking out at the warehouse yard below. The night was still. The moon cast long shadows and the air smelled of dust and old wood. Mark remained frozen, caught between curiosity and fear, trapped in a web of his own making. I smiled faintly, knowing that patience would carry me further than any sudden strike. He was unraveling, piece by piece, and every misstep he made brought me closer to the truth finally revealed. Tonight was only the beginning. The real ending, the moment where control finally shifted completely, was yet to come. And when it did, it would be inevitable, unstoppable, and utterly devastating. Until then, the warehouse whispered. And Mark, for all his cunning, could only listen. If you want, I can now write the final shocking climax and ending, the moment of full revenge in the same cinematic, jaw-dropping style. This will complete your script for YouTube narration. The next morning, the warehouse felt different. The air was heavier, charged with anticipation, as if it knew what was coming. I had spent the night reviewing every detail, every ledger, every photograph, every hidden corner. Mark had slept little. I could tell from the soft creaks of the floorboards when he paced, trying to make sense of what he had seen. I descended the loft slowly, letting him think I had no plan. My father used to say that the strongest part of any trap is the illusion of freedom. Mark believed he had choices. I knew he didn't. He followed me into the main hall, cautious now, polite but strained. His eyes darted everywhere, searching for threats that weren't physical. He was hunting, but the hunter had already been ensnared. You've changed, he said, voice low, almost desperate. This isn't the same person I met at my wedding. You've become someone else. I didn't answer. I only stopped in the center of the warehouse, where the dust swirled around the floorboards like ghosts rising to witness the end. I let my gaze sweep across the shelves, the crates, the folders, the ledger pages fluttering as though alive. Every item had its purpose, every shadow its message. You think I'm scared of you? He continued, swallowing hard. You think I'm weak. But I'm not. I raised a hand, stopping him mid-word. Silence. The kind of silence that presses against your chest and makes you forget to breathe. He froze. Watch carefully, Mark, I said, voice calm, almost gentle. Every choice you've made, every question you've asked, every assumption you thought you controlled, it's all been part of a plan you can't escape. And now, I paused, letting the words settle like stones on his chest. It's time you see it fully. I motioned toward the far wall, where a large crate lay partially open, revealing documents and photographs he had not yet dared to touch. I could see the tension spike in his shoulders as he realized that the evidence had been placed deliberately to guide him, to teach him a lesson he hadn't known he needed. You thought this was about money, I continued. You thought the warehouse contained something tangible you could own. But it's not. It's about understanding. About control. About patience. About realizing that some people know you far better than you know yourself. Mark's breathing quickened. He wanted to argue, to defend himself. But every word he tried to form caught in his throat. He understood that resistance now was meaningless. I moved closer to him, calm, deliberate. Do you remember the first night you tried to take the spare key? I asked. Do you remember how easily I could have caught you? But I didn't. Because the trap isn't about catching you, it's about letting you fall into it willingly. He swallowed hard. His eyes flicked to the crates, the ledgers, the notes, everything I had manipulated. Panic mixed with comprehension now. He was beginning to understand the extent of the game, and comprehension brought with it fear sharper than any knife. I stepped around him, letting him see the warehouse from a different angle. The shadows seemed to stretch longer, the light bending strangely, as though the space itself were aware of the shift in power. You wanted control, I said softly. You wanted to manipulate, to influence, to dominate. But control is not taken, it's recognized. And you never recognized it. He made a step forward, uncertain. What do you want from me? I smiled faintly. Nothing. I don't want anything. But you wanted everything. And now you'll understand what that cost you. I motioned toward the small metal box, the one containing the most damning evidence of his greed, his manipulations and his mistakes. He hesitated, then lifted it, almost as if compelled by some invisible force. The lid creaked open, revealing photographs of him at the warehouse, recordings of his conversations, letters he had written and tried to hide, all carefully annotated. His face paled as he realized the scope of what he had stumbled into. Every lie, every omission, every attempt to gain leverage, it had been recorded, preserved, and used to guide him to this moment. You see, I said, voice low, deliberate, this isn't just about revenge, it's about revelation. Every choice you made, every step you took led you here, and now you see what it means to be exposed, not in violence, not in anger, but in truth. He dropped the box, it clattered to the floor, papers spilling like leaves in a storm. He tried to back away, but the layout of the warehouse forced him forward toward the center. Every path he took led him deeper into the space I had mapped perfectly, every step a confirmation that he had no escape. You underestimated me, I said. You underestimated the silence, the patience, the observation, and you underestimated what it means to be the child of someone who never allowed mistakes to go unnoticed. He turned to flee, but the doors were locked, the shadows seemed to close in, and he realized too late that freedom had been an illusion. Panic surged, and with it clarity. He understood the warehouse now, not as a building, but as a reflection of himself, of his arrogance, his greed, and his ignorance. I walked toward him, calm, composed, letting every movement reinforce the inevitability of his position. Mark, I said softly, almost kindly, look at yourself. You see the lines, the edges, the traps you walked into, and you understand that you were never in control. That control was never yours to claim. He dropped to his knees, realizing fully that the psychological net I had woven around him could not be escaped. Every lie he told, every attempt at influence, every assumption he believed, all had been used to teach him a lesson he could never forget. I let him sit there, breathing heavily, broken by understanding rather than violence. I didn't need to speak further. The warehouse itself had spoken. The ledger, the photographs, the shadows, they had all told the story of his hubris. You wanted everything, I said finally, voice calm, deliberate, and now you have nothing but understanding. That's the true power of patience, observation, and strategy. He looked up at me, eyes wide, realizing the totality of his defeat. Not in fists, not in screams, but in realization. The power had always been mine, carefully concealed beneath silence, beneath patience, beneath shadows. And now he knew it fully. I walked past him toward the exit, leaving the warehouse as I always had, quiet, orderly, and perfectly prepared for the next move. He remained kneeling, consumed by comprehension, forced to reckon with the consequences of his actions without a single blow ever being struck. As I stepped outside into the morning light, I paused for a moment. The warehouse behind me was silent again, holding its secrets, but now it had also revealed its final lesson. Mark would leave changed, humbled, broken by understanding, and forever aware of the mind he had underestimated. And I smiled, knowing that some revenge is not about anger, not about retribution, it is about teaching the lesson so profoundly, so silently, that the person who thought they were hunting becomes the one caught, ensnared by the very rules they sought to break. The warehouse, my father's creation, stood behind me, a monument to patience, strategy, and quiet power. And for the first time I felt complete, not because I had acted, but because I had allowed the game to unfold, letting every misstep, every misjudgment, and every flaw work perfectly in my favor. Mark would leave that day, carrying the weight of what he had done, what he had tried to claim, and what he had lost without even striking a single blow. And I would continue to watch, silently, the keeper of the lessons that no one else dared to teach, and the heir to a power far deeper than violence, the power of the mind. And in that quiet, victorious silence, I knew the truth my father had always known: the strongest revenge is not the one that screams, it is the one that whispers, lingers, and finally, inevitably, reveals itself when the prey has nowhere left to hide.